This is the third video and will be on setting up the database that we'll need to create for our users to be able to log into the system. So coming back to the XAMPP control panel, I want to make sure I start the Apache and MySQL to make sure they're both started, and both of them are highlighted green. Assuming that that is now in place, you can go to local, should be able to go to localhost up in the browser. Following that, we're also going to check our connection to our phpmyadmin software. Again, the reason for downloading the XAMPP software is so that way we could activate and use or utilize the PHP code, which is a server-side language. And then in addition, it also comes with MySQL installed, so that allows us to create a web database for what we're going to do next. So I'm going to just quickly copy this URL in a new tab. I'm going to paste it up top, go there, and then after the local host, I'm going to type /phpmyadmin. So localhost /phpmyadmin. Again, these options work, so our website works because the Apache is turned on in the control panel, and then now with the MySQL active, there is a sub program called this phpmyadmin that will connect to the SQL database or MySQL database. Something I want you to kind of see beforehand as we're going into this, and certain reasons why we are going to select things in the future when we're doing the programming the login pages is over here on the right. So this is the main login page. Here on the right, it gives us some information about our server. So the server is the 127.0.0.1 address, which is the loopback address, which is the machine that we're using itself. The server type is called Maria Database, which is just it's an open source version of MySQL. It's pretty much the same thing. Whatever you can do in MySQL, you can also do in this Maria database. Looking at the next couple of options, the user, that this will be important. The user to log into this, because we're going to need this in the code, is called root. Is the root user, and at localhost means the root at this machine. So right, that's kind of something to put in the back of your mind to know. The only thing that we don't know at this point is what is the default password, because you can see by typing that in, it directly kind of logs us in and takes us to this page. There should be a login page prior to this, but since we're here on the local host and we are like on an administrative setting, it's logging us right in, which is fine for what we need. It gives us some additional information about our web server here. It's running the Apache with Open SSL, and the version of PHP we're using is 8.0. And then down here, looking at the PHP extensions, here is MySQLi, curl, and MB string. So this MySQLi will come into play when we're looking at coding the login pages. So just wanted to kind of touch on some of those before moving on. So the purpose of this video is for us to create a database so that way we can put some usernames and passwords, so that way we can log in using our form. If you've used MySQL before, MySQL comes with a few databases already created. It's part of like the template. So the information schema, the MySQL database itself, which stores like the users of the MySQL system, a performance schema, and then since we're using the phpmyadmin software, there's a database for that, and then a test value. So I want to make a database that's called employee. So click on databases. And then under the database name, I'm going to call it employee. It doesn't matter if it's lowercase or uppercase, depending if you've had the database class prior to this. You may have been taught certain ways to enter the name of a database or how you enter tables. I kind of switch between the two. Sometimes what I usually like to do is put both the database and tables in like uppercase, so that way I kind of know the difference between the table and then I put all the columns in lowercase lettering, so that way I kind of know the difference when it comes to the commands. Sometimes I put everything in lowercase and then maybe type the commands out in, if we're hard coding the commands, just put those commands in uppercase, just so I can see a good difference in the code. Again, you might understand what I'm saying there if you've had the database class prior and you did SQL based programming. So I'm going to call our database employee, and I'm not going to change the coding type. Just going to go with the default here and click create. And you'll see here on the left, we add the employee database. So that's just the shell of it. Inside we need to make some tables. So you can see that that goes right from the employee creation to creating a table. So the table we want to make is called users, or user, maybe just user. So the user table, and how many columns. For right now, we only need to store a username and a password. And for the most part, our username should be unique. So that's pretty much our primary key for the table. So I only need 2 columns here. So table name is user, create 2 columns, click create. Next, that will lead us to the types of columns that we're going to create. We kind of have to do this all in the same process. So the first column is the username column, and the second column is password. And a username is usually going to be somebody's like first initial last name, usually name based. There could be numbers in there as well. So it's definitely not an integer type of variable. So I want to drop this down. And so if you're familiar with Java programming, Python programming, or other like C++, other languages like that, when I have something that's text-based that may even include a number, that's usually a string. However, it's slightly different in SQL programming. It's called varchar, which is short for variable character. And same thing with passwords. Since password will likely use letters, numbers, uppercase letters, and even possibly symbols, I need that to be varchar as well. The one thing with varchar though is I have to tell it, because it's like a string type of variable, I do have to tell it how much space to take up. So we have to give it a length or value. In other words, what is the length of characters that it can be. So usually if you don't have a default, like a good default 10 is kind of like usually 25. But that seems like it might be an awful lot for a username or a password. But without other ideas, maybe your username would be 20 or 15, like no more than 15 characters. But I mean, sometimes there's long names and stuff. So 25, and we'll just use the kind of the standard default of 25. And same thing with password. As passwords, as we are trying to move towards like a more complicated password systems, or not easily breakable, they usually have to end up being longer strings. Just looking at what pretty much this is really all we need for these. I'm just going to check these other ones if there's anything that we should have there. That's really all we have to have is the name of the column and what data type. These are just other property values of that column if we need it. We would check this box if it's, I'm pretty sure if it's allowed to, if we, so is this field allowed to be null? Is it allowed to be blank? Yes or no? I believe by leaving it go, it is allowed to be null, and if it is checked, it makes it not null. So if you know anything about primary keys, they're not allowed to be null. But at this right now, just since we're doing a lot of like just testing and building this, and it's not important for me to make sure that the username is the primary key column, even though ideally it is or probably should be. So in a more sophisticated, or once we've gone through the testing process, like I would change this to a not null state, so that way you have if I don't have a username, then I don't have that person in the system. So I can't have a password without a username. And then index, if we want it to be the primary key or some other property. And then AI is short for auto increment. So if you wanted, if you had, if you didn't really have a primary key that you could assign to something, depending on how the table was built, an easy way to just give it like a primary key would be just having it on auto increment rows. So row 1, row 2, 3, 4, so on, and those numbers become the primary key. So we don't need anything else except for those 3 properties or attributes to be changed or added. So once you have that, you can click on Save. I'm just making sure there's no other buttons or anything else that we should put in. Might take a moment. And you might see in that process, it either say like you might get a green check mark. It might also give you the example of the code that was used to make it, and it should kind of get to this screen then, which gives us the structure of the table, which is the username and varchar 25, and password, same thing, same properties. And then what we need to do next is just put, maybe make 2 rows of sample login options, so that way we can kind of test that in our form. So we want to, if you are familiar with SQL programming, to put information into the table that's created, we usually use an insert command, insert values into. So up top here, if you come to the Insert tab, it'll give you a few places for us to enter some values. And you can, if you have more than just 2, you can just do 2 at a time and hit go, and it'll create a new page with two new blank options. And I think that down here, if you wanted to have a lot more rows at one time to try to enter information. So we're not running any functions with these. All we're doing is just putting value in there. So, type a example username to use. And along with a password. After you enter the second value, another username and password, so we can try to test out 2 of them. Click one of these go buttons that should take you to a screen with a green check mark, and also the example SQL code that's used to enter those values. Since I'm running very close to the end of my maximum time for the video, once you click go and it successfully looks like those were entered, click on the user table on the left here to kind of reset our view. And if you look in the center area again here, you should see our table listed here with the 2 columns along with the 2 example usernames and passwords that were entered, so the 2 rows. That'll be it for this video. Moving on next to making sure that the form is coded right, so that way it can go start the login process.